Hello, my name's Dr. Shah. I'm a GP and I'm one of the directors of MedLight and Medical Education. In today's video, we're going to talk about something that causes candidates a lot of stress in medical exams, and that's when you have a patient who won't speak to you. So, if you have a patient who won't speak to you, they may be evasive or they may be silent. So, evasive means that, for example, if you ask them, Mrs. Smith, how did you injure your arm? Mrs. Smith might just say, it's a long story, and change the subject. Or Mrs. Smith might be completely silent and not say a word. Why could it be that a patient won't speak to you? Well, there could be a number of reasons. It could be that your patient is embarrassed. It could be that your patient feels sad or hopeless and feels, what's the point in speaking to the doctor because no one's going to be able to help me anyway. Or your patient might be scared, or it could be a combination of all three. Let's start by talking about embarrassed patients. So, if you have a patient who's embarrassed, what you want to get across to them is that as doctors, we've seen it all before, and you may also want to bring in confidentiality. So, what you might say is, Mr. Smith, as GPs, we've seen most things, so I don't think anything you tell me will shock or surprise me. And then if Mr. Smith then admits that, for example, he's unable to get an erection, you might say, well, thank you for explaining that, Mr. Smith. That's actually something we do see fairly commonly as doctors, and we should absolutely be able to help. So you make him feel good about telling you, and you tell him again that it's very common, so you reiterate it's a common problem, and you reassure him you can help. If you choose to bring in the subject of confidentiality, and we have a separate video on confidentiality, but you may wish to say something along the lines of, well, we would always keep things confidential unless we believed you or someone else was in danger. But if we did need to break confidentiality, we would always explain to you why this was necessary first. Now, the next situation is if your patient is sad or hopeless. In that situation, you really want to give the patient hope that you will be able to help. In this situation, it's likely that your patient will be silent, and you want to say something like, Mrs. Smith, now, if you are able to tell me what's going on, then I'm sure that there's a lot we can do to help. And then if Mrs. Smith does open up to you, you want to say something like, thank you for sharing that, Mrs. Smith. From what you've told me, I absolutely do think we should be able to help. So it's all about giving them hope that you will be able to help. The third situation is if your patient is scared. And in this situation, you want to reassure your patient that this is a safe space. If they keep glancing towards the door, you want to check that there's no one outside who could be listening to the conversation. And you want to promise confidentiality, but there's an additional thing to add to your confidentiality discussion. So, as well as telling your patient that you would always keep things confidential if you believed they or someone else was in danger, you would also explain that you would never break confidentiality in a way that put the patient in danger. So that's how you deal with patients who won't open up. If they're embarrassed, you would normalise the situation and say that as doctors you've seen most things. If they're sad, you would explain to the patient you will absolutely be able to help. And if they're scared, you would reassure them that it's a safe space and that you would never put the patient in any danger. So I hope this helps with those difficult scenarios when you have a patient that won't open up. You can check out our YouTube channel for many more videos on PLAB2 and RCA and MRCGP. And if you do have a video request, then please message us. Many thanks. Happy revising.